slowed down that release. We wanted to have it out by now, but we will get it out next week. So it'll be updated on your clusters running in Azure, and then we'll get the SDK out as well. So that is coming. It is later than we wanted, but it's coming out next week.
Yeah, so that's the...
That'll be the 2.2 SDK and the 5.2 runtime.
And then, of course, we're going to we'll continue to have regular releases every 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how we encounter features and bugs. All right. So, with that, is there anything else? Anyone else wants to do any other announcements on things particular?
I guess the other thing is, looking forward to the next month. A bunch of us will be at Ignite. So if you're interested in coming by and chatting, we'll have a booth there and
yes.
a number of sessions.
Yes.
So come and say hello.
Yes, most of us will be there for the entire week. So we can either come and chat us at the booth, or you can actually set up even private meetings if you want to talk about things.
Or if you just want to get a beer, we can do that too.
And it's happening in Atlanta.
And if you haven't registered, it's probably too late.
Yes. Yeah, you probably know if you're going to Ignite by now.
Yeah.
All right. So
I think there's still day passes available if you're heading to Atlanta that week, end of September.
Question on that. There's a question. I am.
Okay. Well, let's start off with the first question. Yes. Will we have timestamps on Service Fabric Explorer on the next release? You let us know when the alert happened.
Like on health events.
Except they're wrong.
If it's on health events, there should be timestamps that are ready. Unfortunately, there's a bug and it's wrong. The time is actually incorrect on how, like the TTL or things like that. The VS guys are supposed to be fixing that.
Oh.
So answer is true. The second point there was: is there a way to force an update on Azure clusters, or we have to wait for to update automatically? So today's answer is the cluster upgrades happen automatically. There's nothing which you need to do to upgrade the Azure clusters. Going forward, we are working on some features which will allow you to control as to what versions get applied to your cluster. So that's coming, but it's still in the works.
And you should describe that a little bit more. What does it mean?
Okay, so basically you can put your cluster in two modes: automatic or manual. And if it is automatic, of course, the behavior is exactly the same as it is today. If it's manual, then then basically you get to choose among the supported versions you can upgrade your cluster to. So there'll be lots more documentation and when the announcement is made. So it looks like you have a follow-up question here. I have a cluster and it's not updated from the last month's release. So it's been some time since we have released, but typically a cluster doesn't get upgraded for only two reasons. One, the health of the cluster is bad. Basically, health could be the number of nodes which are up, or that you have applications which are unhealthy. So if applications are unhealthy, typically we roll back unless we change our health policies for the particular upgrade and then push it through. So we've not been very aggressive at this point, and that's the only reason why it's still not moved, if that's the case. So if you want to follow up offline, give us the cluster ID and then certainly we can take a look. Cluster ID and the region.
So there's a question then posted, which is, we're still thinking around a public repository for Service Fabric packages, similar to the DCOS universe.
Yeah, so that's something that we've talked about for a while. So I guess there's two levels to this: application packages and then service packages. There is work going on around allowing you to package up your services. In fact, we've one of our colleagues, Haishi, has done some prototyping around packaging services as NuGet packages. So if you just search Service Fabric NuGet, you'll find that. And we're looking at making that first class in Visual Studio, so you can just reference to a service and not have to pull down the source code. On the application package front, like having a marketplace for application packages, something we've talked about, not something that's actively in the works at this point.
I posted the link to Hashibai's experimental direction in going down NuGet. And he also has a blog post for it somewhere as well if you search for that. I think it's a pretty interesting direction for us to go, though. So we'd love to have feedback on that, if that is a good way of thinking about how you pull down different packages and include them as part of your project. So then let's go for the one from Madden. Sorry, John. Best practice for managing application settings, things like connection string or auth keys for resources. Ideally one that's managed in Azure and not in our XMLs as part of the project, whereas it doesn't for anyone with source code access. For example, Azure WebJOS uses Azure configuration NuGet. It looks like Azure settings before looking in local app.config. Well, the mechanism we have. Yeah, Baz, you go.
There's definitely a best practices for this. Actually, we have a new document out. I'll put up a link in the IM window in a little bit. But we do have best practices for managing application settings and securing application settings. So anything that's application secrets, for example, we actually have APIs built in for encrypting and decrypting application secrets. And that all goes through a settings XML file, which is what you have in your config package. And what we do is we allow you to override all of those settings in that file through application parameters. And this happens when you go and create a new application instance. You can pass in application parameters that will then kind of get funneled down into your settings XML and override things. So if you're building through Visual Studio, you'll see in your, I think it's the application config directory in your application project, you'll see that local XML and cloud XML. Those are kind of XML. They're Visual Studio constructs. They're XML files where you can put in environment-specific configuration settings, but actually those get plumbed into the Service Fabric management APIs where you go and create application instances. So it actually all just kind of gets plumbed through there. And what you can do is when you set up a build system, when you have a build process in your CI/CD environment or something like that, the idea is that you go and you take secret values or sensitive values, you encrypt them at build time, and then you plumb them down in through the application parameters, and they end up as encrypted strings at runtime that you can then pull out and decrypt through Service Fabric APIs. And there's a document that kind of explains the thinking behind this and how it works. The idea of using an external configuration, we typically discourage using global configurations, and there's a real simple reason behind it, and it's just that when you go and make configuration changes, or any kind of changes actually to your services and to your applications, what we want you to do is we want you to roll those out in a rolling fashion. So every kind of upgrade you do here is a rolling upgrade where you do one upgrade domain at a time. And that's true for configuration too. And especially for configuration, in fact, because if you do something like a global config where you have a single global configuration up on storage somewhere, and you go and make a change and it affects all of your service instances at the same time, the issue with that is that if you make a mistake, or if you put in a bad configuration value, you've now wiped out all of your services simultaneously and you've caused downtime. And so we always try to prevent downtime by doing rolling upgrades. So all that stuff ends up in config packages, and you do the upgrades through config packages there. So let me go dig up that link while we move on to the next question.
Checker.
Well, the next one is reliable collections are not supported in Java 8.
Oh yes, forgot that one.
Yes. So currently, there is not an alternative. You can just use actors or services. To give a little more background on why it is not so is because reliable collections in C# today is written in C#. So what we are doing right now is we are putting that code base to native code so that we can basically expose it to all languages, not just C# or Java, but any other languages as well. So So it's going to be several months before that's available in Java.
Thank you.
All right. So the next one says, do you plan any limitations on silver durability tier? Very first thing, there's some confusion out there that silver durability tier is available today. So today, silver durability tier is not available. So you shouldn't be using it at all. There are only two things available. One is bronze, that means there is no durability guarantees at all. And then there's gold, which actually is available only on two SKUs, D15, V2, and G5. In the future, maybe in the next couple of months, we actually will enable, or we are planning to enable, the silver durability. So once the silver durability is available, basically you will have infrastructure integration on all SKUs. So it doesn't mean that you have to get the complete node like D15 or G5. So that's coming. So the minimal size for those most likely would be a D1 or an A1. A0s will not have any durability at all. So that would be the minimum. So hopefully that answers your question. So Ryan's question. So Ryan's question. The portal limits the number of node types to 3. Is that a soft limit in the portal, or is it so that the current limit that we might hit using ARM? So the main reason why we limited that node types to 3 on portal was just basically to cover around 80 to 90% of use case scenarios where we've seen that customers don't exceed more than 3. But from the back end, there is no such limits. You can actually have any number of node types you want. And if you have a need today, you can use that. You can request any number of node types using the ARM template. So the current limitations you should be aware of is basically node type today is equal to a VMSS, and VMSS today is limited to 100 nodes. So if you are reaching a point where you are in need of a 1,000 node cluster, then you would most likely end up with 10 node types, so which is supported. All right. So then,
well, the next question is: any plans for native PubSub system or streams offered, which is similar to offered by Orleans? Vaz, are you able?
Yeah, this is something we've been talking about internally for a while. We know PubSub is a pretty it's a thing that people ask for pretty frequently. So we're talking about it internally. I don't have any concrete timelines or plans, but it is something we're thinking about. So yeah.
So then you posted your link. Ivan asks, is there a roadmap for RA? Is that reliable actors? Is that what you mean?
Yes, correct.
Guys, do you want to talk about some of the things that are happening there?
Yeah, so we don't have a roadmap published publicly, although we'd kind of like to start doing that eventually when we move things out into the open. It is something we're going to be open sourcing, so we'd like to not only get a kind of roadmap published, but get community engagement on that as well. So some of the things that are coming up in our long-awaited 5.2 release, the main thing there is you'll now have full constructor dependency injection available in actors. So a lot of the platform dependencies that you couldn't mock out or inject previously, like the state manager, for example, that'll be something that you can now inject through the constructor, as well as the actor service itself. So all these things will be injectable. You can inject your own implementations of them if you want. You can inject mocks for unit testing and things like that. So that's all coming up in 5.2. And then beyond that, one of the major things that we're working on is kind of a big set of improvements to the remoting stack as a whole. So that's the remote procedure call communication stack between services, and actors obviously depends on this pretty heavily. And so what we're doing with that is we're improving a lot of the performance characteristics of that, but we're also allowing you to plug in more, do a little more customization with that. So you'll be able to plug in custom serializers, and you'll be able to plug in your own custom transports as well. So you'll be able to do things like remoting over HTTP if you want. And even that should even be technically possible today. We're making that a lot easier for you. So that's one of the big investments we're making on both actors and services, actually, is just improving that remote procedure call communication. So those are a couple of big things that are coming up for actors.
And I know we mentioned PubSub. If there are other suggestions that you'd like to see, Van, tell us what you're looking for.
Can I just request to, if you're making it possible to do unit testing with mocking out an actor service, it'd be really helpful to have some guidance around that, because currently I don't know much of what the actor service class does or what it handles. So any kind of guidance around how to mock something like that up would be really appreciated.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, when that comes out, we'll definitely write up a little more guidance around it and have a couple of sample projects that show you how to actually do it.
Perfect.
In the reliable services as well, I think we don't have a lot of actual conceptual documentation around, although there are a couple of sample applications that show you how to do it, but we'll definitely improve on both of those for actors and services for you.
I think you do some mocking of showing reliable services in the party clusters example, isn't that right?
Yeah, there's actually more, if I remember correctly, there's more unit test code in the party cluster sample than there is actual service code. So if you're curious on how to do unit testing in a reliable services application, definitely check out the party cluster sample.
Okay, so next question really is about 64-bit and non-64-bit support and what our plans are there. Do you want to talk to this one, Vaz? Or I guess everything at the moment is 64-bit supported. We don't really plan to do non-64-bit support. It's all... Yeah,
so I mean all the Service Fabric libraries themselves are 64-bit, and so you have to compile your applications to 64-bit as well. The only exception, the only odd exception is ASP.NET Core, which doesn't really let you select an x64 build configuration, and it kind of forces you to build any CPU, at least through Visual Studio. But with that exception, all of your binaries that you produce to run on Service Fabric should be x64.
So that leads to the problem I mentioned, which is if I'm trying to host something with a framework like mobile apps that has an x86 dependency, and let's say it's a hard dependency that I can't remove, what do you recommend doing?
And you don't have a way.
Is there a way to do do you have a recommended pattern for hosting it in a child process or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something you can do. So there's a funny thing you can do, which is you can put in multiple code packages into a service. So if you go look in your service manifest, I don't know, you might have seen this. There's a section that says where you specify the code packages, which is your executable and your DLLs. And you can actually put multiple of those into a single service manifest. And basically what that'll do is we'll just activate those, if they're EXEs, we'll activate those two EXEs. Mm-hmm. And if you treat it as a guest EXE, then all it is you don't want to try to load up the Service Fabric assemblies into your process, because then you'll get this bitness mismatch.
Right.
So if you host it without calling into any of the Service Fabric APIs, then you probably should be fine. But then you have to do a little bit of inter-process communication between the two. So that might be one way to work around it.
I think that gets me halfway there. The other half of it that would be really nice is if there was some kind of just the client library for, let's say, the actors, where I could make a call to an actor service from an x86-based process without having to write my own, wrapper internal service API.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even today, if we did ship a client API, it would still be x64. So we'd have to look into shipping an NeCPU or 32-bit version of that.
That would be ideal, yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking to actors, you kind of have to use that client piece. But if you're using just services, then what I would recommend doing there is set up your communication to just be, platform agnostic, or basically use some other protocol other than the remoting stack, so then you don't have to rely on our clients. So typically, what I see people doing
HTTP, but we'd love to do just direct calls to the actors. If that NeCPU library is even a possibility, it'd be great to know that.
Right. Okay. Definitely noted. We'll take a look at that.
Thanks.
So state of serialization improvements. What's planned in 5.2?
Yeah, so the serialization improvements, at least in the remoting stack, so if you're doing remote procedure call between services or actors, those serialization improvements will come in a release after 5.2, likely 5.3. Other than that, those are the only serialization improvements we have planned currently. We're still kind of looking into providing easier serialization, custom serialization for reliable collections. Now, one of the things we are doing that I didn't mention earlier when I was talking about actors is we are actually working on bringing the reliable collections into actors. So the backing state provider, the thing that stores your state today in actors, is a slightly different state provider, which is similar to reliable collections, but it isn't reliable collections. And so what we're working on is actually making reliable collections the backing store or the backing state provider for actors. And so when we do that, you'll actually get all of the features of reliable collections available in actors, which includes custom serialization, and that's something that's supported in collections today. So that's what's coming on to actors in addition to the remoting custom serialization. But again, this is all post 5.2, so this will be at least a few months out.
And again, on the question of when 5.2 is coming, you should expect it next week.
So let's keep going. So +1 on PubSub, yes. Equivalency of stateless worker in Orleans. So Service Fabric has stateless services you can create. I guess you're sort of referring to that the backing store can be anything, such as like Azure storage or blob storage or some other form of storage. I presume that's what you're referring to there. Today we have seen people just take actor state and just write it out to blob storage themselves, rather than writing it to taking advantage of our stateful actors. So that's one way of doing that.
So maybe have him explain what he means. So
yeah, maybe explain what you want stateless work.
I mean, if you can explain as to what is that exactly what you're looking for. So for us, we already are there. So you can use a stateless service, do a service actor, and then do whatever. Whatever you want to do with the state.
I would be curious to hear. Exactly what your scenarios are for using stateless actors specifically, because we had a concept of stateless actors at one point, but the reason we took them out is because it turned out they weren't actually, they weren't technically stateless, because you still had a actor ID that would map to a specific instance. So in order to be truly stateless, an actor ID would never map to a specific instance. It would be more like a stateless service, where if I call into a stateless service, it could go into any instance of it because it's stateless, so it shouldn't really matter. And what we realized is that we already had that implemented, and that was just stateless services, which was effectively the same thing, and so we went and took that out. Now, if you have a specific scenario in mind, or if you have a good use case for using actual stateless actor workers, we'd be interested to hear it, and we can reconsider bringing back a similar feature. So just let us know.
Yeah, this is not that much about the stateless actor. It's more about the stateless worker actor, So pretty much what it means in Orleans, you declare some actor as a stateless worker, and it could automatically scaled up or down, based on the load. So yes, we got the services, reliable services in the service fabrics, and they are great. They are very similar. They are just not automatically scaling up and down, and they are not inside the actor model. So I really like this feature. It's got great opportunities for scalability of some services with the temporary loads, where it's going to go up and down, based on the day or hours. So that's one great feature which I would like to see in reliable actors.
Okay, that's good to know. I think currently there is sort of an equivalent of this. It's not specifically built into the actor framework, but what it means is you can create stateless service instances. And so I actually see this pattern fairly frequently, is when you have a workload that's stateless and you just need to go and deploy an instance of the workload. All it means is creating an instance of a stateless service. And if you want that auto scale up, it's actually pretty easy to do. You can set the instance count to this magic -1, and so we just say place that on all nodes, and then scaling up and down is just a matter of adding and removing nodes. So look into that and see if that helps meet the goals for you. In the meantime, we'll start looking into something for stateless actors and see if it makes sense.
Yeah, I understand that, and I use it in that scenario, and it works pretty good. It's just a little bit easier to implement, a little bit easier to scale up or down because it's automated for you, and it's also part of the actor, your framework. So you don't have to be jumping from services to the actors. On the other side, Orleans doesn't have the notion of the services, so everything is actor, So there are some advantages, some trades-off with each platform, but I think this is one of the features which would be really beneficial, to the reliable actors. But we'll see what you can come up with in the future.
Yeah, I mean, on our side, it's sort of reversed. It's kind of flipped on its head, right? So on our side, everything is a service rather than everything being an actor. So actors themselves are actually just hosted in a service. So if you think in terms of services, you can get kind of you get a similar cohesive feel to your application design. So everything is just a service. Some services may be broken down into smaller components called actors if you want, and that would be an actor service. So. Anyways, good to know. We appreciate the feedback, though. It's good.
So, Martin, you've got this. It might be a long shot, and I think you're testing us here. So, have you considered introducing some type of partition-tolerant stateful services using, I believe that's conflict resolution data type, which we're referring to? Which we were just. So the answer is no. As it stands at the moment, everything from a stateful side of things for reliable services is partition aware, and you have to think about the partitioning scheme that you end up with. We've talked about over the years about what it means to have repartitioning across all those services and merging partitions and things, But I mean, we're not actually at a place to kind of talk about a timeline when we do that sort of thing, which would really try and solve that problem where effectively it takes away the concept of you having to think about partitions in this reliable services world in the same way that the actors do for you. So we don't have anything in the plans at that point in time. In the reliable services world, you have to think about your partitions. Anyone add anything to that? Anyone or Baz?
Okay, moving on to the next one.
Right, Mark, you spoke about a potential customer on Tuesday. You're asking about on-premises and GA.
Okay, so the only thing we can state publicly is that it's going to be coming soon. So that's what we can say, and then it'll be pretty soon. So then the other question that you have soon is like in months or in a couple of months.
Okay. You may have heard at the beginning of the call that we'll all be in Atlanta.
Yes.
For Ignite.
For Ignite, with lots of exciting stuff in Atlanta.
Okay, so moving on. All right. Okay, so I was not sure if anything can be shared. Okay, so since not hosting VMs in Azure, will there be any costs of use on SF on-premise? So today, the intent is still for a standalone package on Windows Server will still be free. So that there is no costs from a licensing perspective. And then the costs which you will incur, of course, are basically your own VMs or hosts which you might run.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite interesting for a lot of people, yes, because you can now take Service Fabric, take a sort of Windows Server 2012 R2 and 2016 machines.
Yeah, 2016 is still, we have not announced that package yet, but it will also be coming. So when that comes, then Mark, please continue.
Well, and you can stitch them together with your own network and then deploy Service Fabric clusters.
Yes, and then you can do that on-prem, you can take it to AWS, you can take it to wherever you are more comfortable with. But of course, we will have the best implementation in Azure, so you will all should be using Azure. But
And you'll be able to do upgrades on the clusters on a regular basis, yes?
So the upgrades would be almost similar in terms of what I just talked about earlier, that you actually can set your clusters on to automatic or manual. So the difference here is, since you control that in an automatic way, basically, if you set your cluster to automatic, basically the new version gets downloaded and then you still need to approve it for it to go forward and then roll out. If it's on manual, then you actually can choose to stay a little behind in terms of the current releases, as long as you stay on a supported version. So supported versions are just basically the versions where you can call the customer support and they will be willing to help. If you're not on a supported version, or you are in a submarine scenario where you are off the supported versions, then you will not get any support. So the cost of support is something which there is still debates going on as to how and what will it cost and so forth. So that's something which is TBD.
Yes, thank you.
So Marcin, was it the persistence question? I'm assuming was a part of your previous question, CRDTs, right?
Incremental serialization.
Both of them seem to be associated with that. Okay.
Vaz, do you have anything to say about the Delta serialization?
Yeah, so we don't actually have any plans yet to implement Delta serialization. I know it's kind of there. It's kind of there in the API, but it's not something we're at least we don't have a particular target date for when we're going to start supporting that.
Okay, Paolo, thanks for your link. Yes, Paolo did something very similar to a PubSub pattern with his observer pattern, which is good to go and look at.
Yes, I forgot. Sorry, Paolo, I forgot to mention these. So if you are looking for PubSub, definitely check out Paolo's GitHub repos. He's got a lot of really good projects out there that show how to do different design patterns and things with actors. In particular, the PubSub one's very, very good. So definitely check those out.
So Ivan, looks like you are not on mute, so we can hear you type.
Just mute Mark.
We can mute him. Okay, so Jonathan, if you right click and mute.
Done.
Okay, so Jonathan's question.
Is there going to be any first-class concept of scheduled task or cron jobs rather than act as reminders?
So nothing that we have planned. The thing is, I mean, writing a scheduled task, I mean, I've had to do this a few times in projects that I've worked on. It's actually fairly simple to do with stateful services. I think it's always been kind of a hard thing to do because it's, you always have this idea of what if the thing scheduling my work decides to fail or something like that, and then my work doesn't run. But with stateful services, it should actually be fairly simple to do. We don't really have plans to provide this out of the box, but it's something we can provide some sample code for sure. Really not terribly difficult to do with stateful services. But if you do want something built in, just kind of out of the box, then actor reminders are probably your best bet.
Okay. Any improvements planned around guest executable debugging? I see tighter integration with event source logging, etc.
Yeah.
No, nothing in particular planned. I mean, the idea with guest executables is that they are separate executables, so you can debug them outside of the context of Service Fabric. So when you say tighter integration with event source logging, what specifically are you referring to there?
So right now, a lot of our services use the event source, so we're able to output the events to like Elasticsearch or somewhere else. So I was hoping to kind of take advantage of that so that way we can kind of have all of everything pointing to one place and instead of having to go to dig to the logs.
But is this your? I mean, if this is .NET code that you're writing, it just is not Service Fabric programming models. You can write out to those event sources, yes.
So we've talked about how
Gotcha.
a way to do this. We don't have any plans at this point on how to bring those together from the guest executable, but it's an area we're looking at.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So remote debugging of an on-prem cluster, no plans for that at this point, because we would need to get the debugger actually deployed into your environment, which we're assuming in most cases is going to be a difficult thing to do. So no, not in the cards at this point.
Okay, will you provide some kind of guidance for how it would be possible manually, or assuming we have to install whatever remote debugging tools, enable remote debugging on the servers, all of that, but is there going to be any kind of guidance for remote debugging an on-premise cluster? I understand that a lot of it has to be done manually, so you can't integrate it with the Cloud Explorer.
Yeah, I don't know if Devin or Carol, you guys have any thoughts on that?
We could do some guidance. I mean, essentially, it's not different from just debugging and a process running on a separate machine. So for that, I believe there is guidance already.
Okay, yeah, even just some links to how to do that and maybe considerations for the fact that there's multiple different nodes. Even just a link would be helpful when that's available.
Let me try to dig something up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're reading your question, Marcin.
Okay, so I think I can answer this question. So when we do have multiple data centers or multiple AZs, which Azure will start to offer, at that point, if you have a cluster which crosses boundaries, so the current thinking is basically we will not use the feature from VMSS, which will allow you to span AZs. In fact, we will never want any node type which is directly connected to a VMSS to span multiple AZs because of multiple reasons. The very first one being that the FDs or fault domains, which we rely on very heavily, are not comparable. So we can talk more offline as to what I really mean by not comparable. So that being the case, our placements would be wrong. So that being the case, when we do support it, you would end up with a topology which we Service Fabric understand. So at that point, when we make placement decisions from an application perspective, there won't be a difference, and you'll be fine. The logic will be all in the infrastructure layer.
I think ultimately this question comes down to providing like a more AP style stateful service, right? Versus what Service Fabric is today, which is CP.
Yeah,
There's no plan to do that.
Great. So Marcin, what do you mean by no splits?
No partition.
Yeah, network partitioning.
You need 3 data centers, not 2, basically.
No, of course, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
you need if you're going to do.
oh, this is the brain. Brain split. Okay.
You need to have.
Split brain. So yes, whenever we do span AZs, it'll always be 3 on an odd number. So given that there are only 4 AZs in the world, so it'll always be 3.
Then we're continuing to work on the cross data center.
Yes. So
region.
before you guys ask that question, Mark is prompting me to answer that question. We've heard very loud and clear from the customers that they do want geo-replicated clusters. They do want to span multiple geos. So that's something which we are working with the networking team to make first class, so the connectivity itself. Once the connectivity is available, we will enable that. So today, I don't have a roadmap. We've been told that by end of December, we'll have some kind of a capability coming in. But in terms of from a commitment from Service Fabric, we are not committing to it because we have not got the network at this point in Azure. So if you are a standalone customer and you have a thick pipe between regions, you can absolutely do that.
So are we making you run out of questions, or should we? I don't know if there's anything that we want to touch on the 5.2 release that we haven't mentioned. Do you want to talk anything about on the Linux side?
Well, yeah. So we will have a technical preview that is released soon. You can put 2 plus 2 together on that, but so at that point, it will be available openly, and it will have a Java SDK as well as a C# SDK. So please give that a try when it's released. Nothing more to say.
So I'll touch on one of the things that's going to be available from a tooling dev experience perspective in this upcoming SDK release, which is we've been doing a lot of work on F5 performance. That's been an issue for people, particularly as their applications get larger and include more services. So what that's going to look like is on your one box, you'll have the opportunity to switch to what we're calling one node cluster mode, which is just what it sounds like. Instead of using 5 nodes, which is more of a high fidelity experience to what you get running in Azure or in a standalone cluster, you'll just be deploying to a single node, which cuts down on the number of copies that we need to do and just generally improves the turnaround time for your deployment and debugging. So that we've seen cut down on some of our test projects about half the time that it takes on F5. So that's kind of the first step of improving the F5 experience, and then in a subsequent release, we're looking at trying to get to a point where debugging an individual service is comparable in terms of interloop time to what it would be like to debug it outside of Service Fabric, including having the ability to do sort of edit and refresh on static content, like you're changing your HTML or JavaScript, not actually even having to do a redeployment, so that if you're building, say, an ASP.NET front end, you can do that in the context of your Service Fabric application project and not have to do this funny dance that a lot of people are doing today where they keep the project outside and then actually bring it back in for deployment. So that's one of the big areas that we're working on, and some of those improvements will be in the forthcoming release.
Same question again on dynamically adding new partitions to an existing service. We touched on this earlier. No, we don't have any plans at the moment. One of these things that people ask for, but we don't have it in the books at the moment. At the moment, it's still create another service instance and use that to create more partitions.
Yeah, one of the things, regarding that, one of the things we are looking at doing is providing better guidance on how to plan for expansion of your services that are partitioned. And the way you do that, of course, is with service instances. But we don't have good guidance out there, I don't think, that really explains how to plan for that up front and how to think about how to do that with Service Fabric features. So we're looking at providing that guidance for you. The actual splitting and merging of partitions is sort of an ongoing topic of research, but we don't really have plans to actually get that out as a feature in the product. There are quite a number of things we're working on that we consider higher priority. The question about actors supporting generic actor interfaces, that's a good question. I do believe we were doing some work there, and this is again more related to the remoting stack than it is actors specifically, but just in the remoting stack in general, if you're doing RPC using service proxy, we don't support generic interfaces. But I'll have to go back and check. I believe as part of the overhaul or part of the work we're doing on that remoting stack. I think this was one of the things that was supported, but I'll have to go and check and get back to you on that one. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay, so are we at David's question?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so AAD works great in Azure. Any guidance on this working on on-prem deployments? So there are two things in this question, I believe. One, on-prem currently supports Kerberos, and so you can use Active Directory, and so that's something which you can do today.
And I've just posted a link where the docs are for that.
Yeah, so that's something which you can do. And then the second piece of it is if you really want to use AAD on-prem, we really do not have a guidance for that one, but it'll be very difficult is what I would think. But
yeah, no, they're kind of two separate worlds. So
yeah,
in
so
Azure,
I would
you use AAD. On premise, you can use Active Directory.
Correct.
But we integrated Active Directory many years ago,
yeah.
and so it works pretty well.
Okay, yeah. So if you have questions, absolutely comment on that or ask questions on any forum, and we will answer.
Yes, that link I published kind of shows you how you do it.
So Jonathan's question. Okay, so to me, I'll let Sean also respond to it. So to me, Service Fabric Explorer per se does not really interact directly with VMSS and so forth. It does not understand SKUs or any of those things are at the infrastructure layer, and so that's why those things really are not the places to put that control in. But I do understand the need for better guidance on capacity planning and so forth. So that's something which we'll work on.
Yeah, I mean, we want to keep the Explorer such that it works anywhere that you can deploy a cluster, whether that's one box in Azure or on-prem. So we keep that self-contained and not tie it into any Azure-specific concepts. That said, we are adding additional management actions in the Explorer that are cluster management actions, not sort of infrastructure actions. So if there's things that you want to see there, like things that you can do via PowerShell, for example, that you don't see in the Explorer, definitely let us know, and we can consider adding those in.
And turning back just to the Active Directory thing as a whole, we've seen a lot of interest and feedback from people about making clusters secure and what that's like. And so we're going to be improving our guidance and working with like network security groups so that you can actually lock down your cluster behind network security groups and just expose just the application ports and not expose management ports, and even not expose any external ports if that's all you want, but still get the benefits of SFR. Well, still get the benefits of managed service updating the cluster. Yes.
Yes. So couple of things which we've seen from tier 1 customers who have now started to design their services and go to production. So one of the key things they have as best practice basically is the use of network security groups. Also, just shutting down any access of the management plane from outside. Basically, they do have jump boxes or dedicated VMs, which are the only ways to get into and manage the cluster. So it's all adding more security to it. We'll actually have some samples which we'll also publish, which will talk about these best practices. So it's coming. It's just still not there yet. And yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
I was just trying to dig out. There's a blog link to Brett Steinman who did an article on network security groups that we're going to be pulling into the main docs.
Correct. So any features are coming up, query?
So tooling for data inspection, not immediately on the horizon, though we know it's a pretty common request. In fact, I think when I did a quick poll on tooling requests on our NDA Yammer group, and this was number 1. So it's something that we need to start working on, because we obviously understand that if you have your data inside a dictionary, you want to be able to see it. So it's not immediately forthcoming, but something that we need to work on.
So since there are no more questions, I'm going to ask a polling question at this point. So while we are at the secure cluster scenario, so in talking to a lot of our security folks, one of the biggest feedbacks which we've got is not to support unsecure clusters at all. So if we were to take that out of the portal, will you guys be really mad at us, or you're okay with it? Because truly we do not want any clusters out there which is not secure. You can even, we allow you to use self-signed certs. It is understood that creating a secure cluster is a pain, but the probabilities of one of your clusters getting compromised is pretty high if it is unsecure. So there is a thought, at least we're debating internally as to should we even support it? Okay.
Take-away secure portals, okay with keeping it?
So Sid's thing is okay. So now I understand. So let me respond to Sid's thing. So we've talked about that. So can we not just create a self-signed cert, and then as a part of the experience, at the end of it, you just download it from the portal? We've talked about it. Maybe the only catch in that was we would end up having to give you a password to your PFX. So we can certainly generate it. That's a great idea. So if you think that's acceptable, then we can do it. What will happen to the party cluster? So party clusters will stay on.
Yeah, they
Party's not going anywhere. Party will keep partying.
Yeah, they will remain unsecure.
Yeah.
Should be okay with non-secure. How will I do demos? I think it looks like.
Yeah, the self-signed certs are supported today, so you should be fine there.
I think it's as long as we make it easy for you to quickly create one and it's secure.
Yeah, so I think the only acceptable solution there seems to be that we will actually create a self-signed cert in one of your key vaults and then have you download that PFX. So very interesting. Okay, it's a lot of work. Okay, Richard says,
make it harder for people to play. Well, that's creating your own clusters. Yes.
Yeah, portal experience for Key Vault would be nice. I think that's coming up, isn't it?
It is coming. What's interesting about what they would do is it's pretty generic, and so it'll always be a two-phase way of doing things. Most likely, customers will have to go to the Key Vault and create it there, come back, and then create the cluster. So it will not be a seamless one unless we provide it in our own portal.
By the way, Lars, when you say last time it took 2 days, we rewrote the article on how to create a secure cluster, so it was much more streamlined. So it takes you from the very beginning all the way to the end, encourages you to set up AAD for authentication of endpoints, but still creates search for secure cluster. Try it out and give us a feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lars, as a point of self-criticism, it took me 2 days at one point too, and that was I basically documented that process, and so if you follow that guide from start to finish, you end up with a secure cluster, and hopefully it should take you less than 2 days.
Yeah, hopefully, yes.
But yeah, plan for like good 1 hour or so.
But we recognize that there are other challenges because of Key Vault and things that also.
Script. Yes, so Sid, I actually have a complete module which creates you all the self-signed certs and everything else, which is in my Git repo. So a lot of customers do use it. The reason why it's not in the product itself is because it's not a functionality which we own. So that's the only reason why it's not.
Well,
because Key Vault constantly breaks my script. So
we probably just need to find a better place than your private Git.
Yeah, we can put it on our samples.
We actually talked about that yesterday about putting those, having some scripts that are in some samples deeper.
Yeah, samples repo is fine. Okay, so Marcin's comment about single mistake in ARM template. So one of those things which we have done at this point is, so far we actually had not published the cluster schema itself. So you were not able to do /validate on your ARM template. So going forward, you should be able to do so. So at least you will catch a lot of these bugs up front. There is no real way to, unless Keyvault itself supports it, to figure out if the Keyvault exists at the validation time. So that's why it fails at the deployment time. So it'll slowly improve. People are aware of it. It's a very strong feedback from the ARM community.
So that schema that's been published?
Yes, it's published now.
Yeah, but how do I take advantage of it?
You can, when you use /validate, you can use it. Actually validates if there are any issues with the JSON itself. Marcin is in pain. So Marcin, your question about, so the way I have at least, when I have set up my clusters, I always have key vaults in a separate resource group, so that I don't accidentally delete it, do anything of that nature. And then Key Vault also accepts or expects that you have a regional resource for each of the keys you have. So for example, if you have two clusters, you can't use the same, in two regions, you can't use the same Key Vault. So that being the case, you're just doing local regional Key Vaults, RGs, name them appropriately, and maybe do not delete in there somewhere, and then reuse them. So the second thing which I've seen also is people trying to create two distinct RGs for a secondary cert or multiple certs. You can actually use the same resource group and the same Key Vault as well. So why can't we use Key Vaults across regions? That's Robbie's comment. So that actually is a limitation from Key Vault. I have tried to figure out what is really wrong with it, but I don't know. I have not been able to get a satisfactory answer, because Key Vault actually does give you a URL which is global. So I really do not know as to why there is such a limitation.
Yeah, we really got to go back to the Key Vault team and check on that.
Yeah, I asked them. They gave me some answer which is not worth repeating here.
So we're down to a minute. Yeah. Getting close out of time.
Brett, we hear you, man. It drives me crazy too.
Yeah, it is bad. Hopefully that situation will improve pretty soon. It's either.
No, well, that's one reason. They have hardware modules in a particular region.
Ah, see, someone really knew this. There.
It's because it's actually protected by physical hardware on the device in those regions. It's probably the main reason why they do it.
But you should be able to use
it doesn't. It is a global resource, right? Yeah. So the key is it's a global resource. It doesn't matter where it is.
We'll go back and ask.
Yeah, we'll ask them again. But.
Any last minute question? Okay. Well, we always enjoy doing these. Please tell your friends and family about them. We'll do them once a month. So we'll have another one probably closer to the end of this month. Actually, it'll probably be I don't know when we're going to do it, because we're going to be at Ignite, so that's going to take up the end of this month. Yeah. So I imagine it'll be right at the beginning of October.
Yep.
It's like we missed something.
Yes, I'll get my mother to join. And great, well, thank you. We'll post this online and speak to you again at the beginning of October.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you. We'll go to the next call.